First of all, RLPA CEO Clint Newton, welcome.
G'day, Jimmy.
Thanks for coming in, mate. I do appreciate it. Making time for us here, making time for the listeners as well. So that's fantastic. Now, this has all sort of come about because a couple of weeks on the radio I was saying, can anyone explain to me the November 1 deadline? And I was looking at it through one prism, and that was the prism of the fan, right? And seeing a player at their club signing for another club that they won't play for 18 months. And on the back of that, we had a conversation. I thought I'd become a convert and said, okay, now I totally understand it. So for the listeners out there, can you explain the relevance and why it's in place, especially from an RLPA point of view?
Yeah, I think, look, we know that I think it's important to point out straight off the bat, there's no model in global sport that is perfect.
Yep.
Also don't think anything, globally can be just like picked up and plugged into our game, because there's a lot of differences, particularly around the pathways, the structure of, our junior and elite competitions that fall below, NRL. One of the key things is, we've tightened it up with regards to when clubs can contact players, so they can only start contacting them in their last 12 months of their deal.
Yep.
That was clearly an issue for fans and clearly an issue for the game, which we tightened right up in the CBA. Now what we've obviously done is we believe that free labour market and the ability to negotiate, both ways, clubs and players, to negotiate in that 12-month window provides a level of fairness and competitive balance. But what it does do is it provides some certainty also for a club that is getting a player and a club that's losing a player. And if we just look at, say, Penrith Panthers, who have probably had the most turnover of roster in the last 5 years, no one could point to me any player of their roster and say they didn't give 100% throughout the course of the year.
Right.
What they can point to is Viliami Kikau, Josh Adokar going to the Dogs starts a procession of players saying, oh, there's some confidence in that club now. That allows people to start building for the future. Jerome Luai, you would suggest that if he had have waited till the end of the year, would Tigers have even got him? Because I reckon his stock price goes through the roof, which then can create some issues around salary cap tension, and people end up getting sort of shoehorned into a place where they're probably paying overs at a really hot time of the market. They went early. Jerome went early. Maybe left money on the table. But what it did do was it allows sponsors, fans, the club to start building for the future. And the battlers, so let's say you and I, we can negotiate at any time. If you left it way late in the season, we all know that the top players are going to be the priority, which then means where does everyone else go? And I think, given the fact our game is the most competitive competition in world sport, no one can point to a better, more competitive one. Albeit, yes, Penrith have won 4 in a row, but that's a pretty
they're an outlier.
They're an outlier. But I just think every year fans are going in, going, we are a chance, and I think that's great for a code.
So, whenever a club has the opportunity to say, "Hey, we don't want you anymore," that balance of power has to be dragged back somehow by the player being able to, for want of a better term, move early and make their decision on where their career is headed.
Well, I think our key position is the contract has to be honoured. It's always been our key position. We're not a soft ear for a player that says, hey, I reckon I should be on more. I want to get out of my contract. You sign your deal. You've worked with your agent. You may have got poorly advised or yes, okay, that's the way you've got for security. You've foregone potential earnings if you want to run that risk.
Yeah.
However, one of the key things in all of that is also that it has to be fairly equal for both parties. We've seen clubs go to, let's use Clint Gutherson more recently, that the club says, listen, you're not in our plans, you're free to look elsewhere. Again, now that can be a tough conversation to have, but provided it's done the right way, it gives everyone certainty about saying, right, I can go into the market, provided, again, the club gives the player every opportunity to play and perform and prepare at their best so they can stay in the shop front window. I think that's a critical element of it.
Okay, so as I said, I'm a convert on that now after having that explained to me by you. So moving past that, expansion. I would imagine the RLPA's position on expansion is great, more job opportunities for our members.
Yeah, I mean, really short, we want expansion. We're supportive of expansion.
Yep.
I think the key thing is always about the success of expansion is going to be about the implementation of it, the role of the different people in that. And you would suggest that Players are front and centre in that, and I made some public commentary, had some public commentary around the PNG expansion bid, and how critical the players were to the success of that bid. There's some great work going on in PNG already that has been going on for quite some time, and we've had some really productive conversations with the government. Yes, it creates more job opportunities. It gives us a bigger reach, which we know that if clubs go into various communities and cities, it is a multiplier when it comes to job opportunities, not just for players, but for people in that area, as well as the economy. So, and again, I think by expansion, as we've said, that then lends itself to the opportunity of the reduction of number of competition rounds. So I think the key thing is always going to be when expansion comes, those that are sort of closest to the problems have to be as closest to the solutions as well. Players are there. They're going to play a critical role in the success of the bid. PNG has its specific nuances there about the role of the player in that, and making sure that the players are fully up to date with all the information, so they are making an informed decision if and when that moment comes along.
So if we look at the expansion areas, Perth, Western Corridor of Brisbane, South Island of New Zealand, and PNG, you're quite right. There's particular nuances to PNG, especially around attracting players there and what type of player that you're going to get. Does allowances or deductions on whether it's taxation or incentives elsewhere destroy the sanctity of the salary cap?
Yeah, I think that's why that all needs to be carefully considered.
Yeah.
Because again, if I'm a club, does it create a fairly significant imbalance in the market? Yeah, potentially. But for the benefit of all, is it a necessary benefit that helps the game advance in a region that is critical to Australia?
Yep.
And the Southern Hemisphere? There's different challenges for Perth. They're going to have to uproot 30 plus players that are largely from the East Coast or New Zealand and the Pacific region, and move them all the way over to Perth.
Yeah.
New Zealand have got same thing. They've got some challenges there as well about junior pathways and the ability to move players back, either back over to New Zealand or to New Zealand. And obviously Brisbane, we've seen the success of the Dolphins.
Yep.
It's been one of the things that they had obviously in their favour, albeit that they were late in getting their recruitment drive going, is that there was a lot of players returning to Queensland that were Queensland based. So that gave them a bit of a draw card. So again, we're pro-expansion. I think we play a critical role in ensuring the success of expansion. If we move into the NRLW space, that's different, because I think where our players are and where our strong position has been is that right now, we don't believe expanding teams is the best way to go. We believe...
Why?
Well, what we want to do is focus on the talent that we've got at the moment.
Yep.
We would rather see expanding squad sizes. Squad sizes of 24 contracted players and 6 dev list players is not enough. We've seen players, by the end of the season, the competitive balance and the tension in the team aren't there. So we'd rather go expanding squad sizes, give more women jobs and opportunities to pursue a career, and expanding the competition length, which then no different to sevens rugby, right? If you're a part of a professional program that have 12 month contracted, training all the time, they are significantly more advanced when they come into our game. And we would welcome rugby sevens girls to come and play our game.
Shout out to you, Maddie Levy. So we talk a lot about scheduling of the women's game on this program. And at the back end of the season, I'm just wondering how involved in scheduling the RLPA get. The NRL is asking us to watch 13 games of footy on a weekend, 14 next year when it does come with the extra game in the NRLW. Is there a better time of the year? And I look to the AFLW, and they've done a lot of things that I think has been counterproductive for them. One of the good things they've done is the timing of the competition, I believe. Is the RLPA involved in those discussions?
Yeah, I mean, the NRL have engaged us, via a consultation process to get our views. There's never been a time since my time in the RLPA, we've got more an educated and engaged and informed group of players. So when we're coming to the table, it's via comprehensive player engagement.
Yep.
The players are happy where the competition sits right now. They enjoy the ability to play double headers with the men. they enjoy playing on the grounds where the fans are obviously there. From a broadcast perspective, yes. From a fan, is it overkill over a weekend? Well, again, I think that the numbers more recently, the game has never generated more revenue. Fans are at an all-time high. Spend per head is up.
Yeah.
So again, there is a balance. I think that, again, our priority is giving the women the opportunity to play centre stage, to give them the profile, to grow revenue, and also to ensure that if they are playing on days like Thursday, that they're compensated for taking, time off work.
Yeah, I don't disagree with the numbers because the numbers are the numbers. I just think what it could be, and I look at State of Origin this year and say, as a standalone event, that held its own as an individual event, all three of those games. So that would not be dependent on, let's have it around the State of Origin time for the men's. Just on the men's, you talked about the new sides coming in. That means it's going to be a new schedule. What's an ideal number of games to be played by an NRL player in your mind?
Look, at the stats that we've got over the last several years amongst our playing group is it's probably around that 22 mark. So again, it all depends on the overall calendar, and schedule that people are, asked to play. So when you look at the current schedule and you've got All-Stars, trial competitions, Vegas, World Club Challenge, potentially 27 rounds, Origin, international finals and international series. I think everyone knows that is a lot. And we know, again, statistically from our players, that they believe a reduction in the number of matches they're asked to play will produce better results for them, either in career length, less injuries, better performance, better recovery time, and then ultimately that produces a better quality for the fan.
Right.
And broadcasters and major partners.
I think that's the exact number. I really do. 19 is too few. Broadcasters are saying, come on, man, you're robbing us of so many games. 22 is a really nice sweet spot. I want to ask you about, and there's a lot of people asking questions, and we'll get to them. And in fact, it's related to a couple of questions that have come in from Mark and from MG at Penrith. Ezra Mam situation. Now, without speaking about that specifically, given someone in that situation, what is the RLPA's response to that? How do you go about supporting your member?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, it's a serious issue.
Yep.
I think any time that someone is in that position, and particularly when community members are affected, it is a serious issue. It's a police matter at the moment. Our core role at the moment, given that it sits outside of the NRL rules, because the police matter needs to run its course before it comes back inside to us.
Yes.
Our job is to ensure that Ezra knows what support's available to him. He knows that what his rights are with regards to what the club can and can't do, or the game, and also speak to his advisors and those that are around him to ensure that that he's in a decent headspace to continue to move forward.
So once that police investigation is completed, then it becomes an NRL Broncos matter. That's when procedural fairness is when you'll get involved. So, for example, this afternoon we have Josh Addo-Carr fronting the Canterbury Bankstown board. You would be very interested in procedural fairness about what decisions are made there.
Yeah, absolutely. And with Josh's case, again, you can say up front that I think, everyone makes various mistakes. I think, whatever the result that comes out of today's boardroom won't define Josh. I think his contribution to the game and the community has been, second to none. And whatever happens, I think, he's absolutely got a place for the inside our game. With regards to what we do, is obviously that matter was dealt with via the police.
Yep.
And worked through. Again, same process, offer support, ensure that he knows what's available to him, talk to his agent and his advisors. And then he's got his own legal advice in today's meeting, which is absolutely well within the players' rights.
Yep.
We will have someone there playing a supporting role from our legal department, and to field any questions that may come their way with regards to CBA and NRL rules related.
Right.
But I think ultimately what our expectation would be that he has provided procedural fairness, and that the matter is kept confidential, given that it is it's a club employee-employer matter.
Yep.
So we would be disappointed if things started to come out from that meeting from that. But again, we will be there in support, but he will have his legal representation and his agent there.
Jimmy, can you ask Clint what's he doing about the cocaine and drug epidemic of his player? Now, that's a perception. That's from MG at Penrith. But then on the back of that, Mark says, Jimmy, a question for Clint. Can you please ask the silence around the drug issues from the RLPA? What is Clint's stand? On the surface, it appears that the association just decides to support the players regardless of the circumstances and the image and the message that it all sends.
It's a good question. I think that I'm happy to answer it. What we believe in is obviously players are we have to agree with the game around players participating in the hazardous and illicit drug policy.
Yep.
So players are subject to testing as soon as they return to training and all through the season. So there's there's three mechanisms of testing that players are going to be subject to. You've got under the NRL's hazardous illicit drug policy, which they can be tested at any time. And it can be target testing if they've got relevant grounds. If they have a strike there that's kept confidential, they will go into the testing pool on a consistent basis to ensure that the players obviously continuing to stay on the right path. They're obviously subject to Sports Integrity Australia testing.
Yep.
For illicit drugs and as well as performance enhancing. And you've got obviously police roadside testing. So again, there is plenty there that players are exposed to, which is part of it, as well as obviously ensuring that there's up-to-date and innovative ways to educate our players, just like every part of the community. But again, they're under a lot of scrutiny, and they understand that. But again, anyone that suggests that they're not subject to testing or a fair regime of testing, they're those three gates that effectively that they have to pass through to be able to play.
Yeah, tested any time, target tested if required. So there you go. Thank you for those questions. Keep them coming in. Lots there. 0457 736 736. We're going to get ourselves to a break. After that, we're back with more from RLPA CEO Clint Newton. Is at 2.5 that Stormy Daniel from Prairie Wood, who's a regular contributor, would ask more than that number. He's only asked the one, so I better get to it. Can you ask Clint how much say or influence the RLPA will have in regards to the next broadcast rights deal, assuming the Players Association will have player welfare at the front of that mind? We've talked about the number of rounds, but it's interesting to note that there's an advisory committee now for the clubs, with 3 chairmen being added to that, about expansion and about broadcast rights. Will the players get an opportunity to have an input there?
Yeah, there's a commitment from the NRL to work through that with us. I mean, again, probably I'm not privy to the agreement in which the clubs have supposedly got an in-principle agreement on some of those types of matters, but we would never look for veto rights over the broadcast deal. We have to. We have to put our trust and confidence in the people that are running the game and governing the game and responsible for obviously doing good deals with broadcasters and major partners. But it would be absolutely in the best interest of the game to try and align on a schedule that they could go to broadcasters with confidence that everyone would get behind it and support it.
Yep.
There is a place for all of it. It's just a matter of how. And I think that, like anything, having clubs and players involved in that process prior to going to broadcasters is going to maximise the success of the deal.
Blood Sky via Twitter wanted to ask you about talent equalisation. Given the fact there is a salary cap but there's no draft, often they go hand in hand. Well, always they go hand in hand. Is it time for a youth draft? Should the NRL start to centralise player development?
I don't believe so. Again, no one can really point to draft type arrangements that have been significantly successful for the transformation of a particular club to go from the bottom to the top. One of our key issues here is based on, again, several years of player data, is that there is still too big of a gap between the top and the bottom clubs. And in our view, and
in what's
in regards
available
to
for the
high
player?
performance environments, club culture, experience within the club, facilities, change room facilities, match facilities, those types of things that all contribute towards the success of the club, and also they're all the hygiene factors that sit around a player. From our perspective, we would always oppose a draft, particularly for a young player, that whilst there's ever a gap of such significance, and given the fact that a player's average career is 40 games, you go to the wrong club early on in your career, and that can be the end of your career.
Yeah.
And so, again, what I would never say, no, we would never do it. What I'm saying is there's a lot of work to be done prior to that. And again, I don't see how that's going to potentially fix any type of equalisation. We've seen the best clubs, manage their rosters really well.
Yep.
I thought Matty Cameron spoke really well the other day with James Graham about how in which they forecast a long way ahead to work out their roster. And I think that can really only come to having consistent people in those key positions. Having the turnover of leaders, turnover of staff doesn't help to build trust and confidence in the player, but also doesn't help with consistency in how you're going to manage your roster.
So one thing someone would say to that is, and look, Matty Cameron, I think, is arguably the best general manager of footy in the league, right? But what Penrith do, and we talk about it on this program, is all clubs leaning into their comparative advantage. Penrith's comparative advantage is they've got this vast array of juniors. So for them to be a development club makes sense. That's not available to all other clubs.
Yeah, I disagree. I think it is available to all other clubs because ultimately you've got clubs can keep 100% of their revenues. They also get a $4.7 million margin on top of player payments. And so there is money there. They've never had more money available to them to spend in various communities or various pathways programs. Penrith have invested a significant amount in their pathways program, which is why they run from probably the Hawkesbury all through the Hawkesbury space, the Western Corridor, and then out to Bathurst.
Yep.
So that is their spend. They've chosen to do that and chosen to invest in the future. We know obviously when Newcastle was thriving, they were investing throughout the Newcastle and Hunter region and all the way up to the mid-north coast.
Yeah.
So again, the clubs have the potential to do it. It's just about having the right people there to be able to structure it to get the return. But again, I don't think every club is ever going to be all junior development clubs. Personally, I'd love to see some guaranteed commitments, from clubs to ensure that they are investing at a certain threshold in junior development and pathways, and they're not just reliant on 4, 5, 6 clubs to develop and then spread that out across the comp.
Not your area, but if the PNG afforded a $3 or $4 million fee to each and every club, if I'm the NRL, I'm instructing them how they can spend that.
Well, I think, again, that's part of how do we make the Pacific strategy, whatever that is, I haven't seen that yet, to be as successful as possible. Now, there's different models that can do that. I think, again, is there an ability to forward plan? So if PNG were to come in, as an example, in 2028, 29, whenever that may be, should we be putting a system in place to have PNG national players that are young, 16, 18, 20-year-olds come over, get educated here in this, in Australia, and be a part of our pathways and the high performance environments.
Yeah.
Give them a chance to secure a contract. If they don't and they can't secure an NRL contract or a State Cup contract, they can return back to PNG, with education, with a skill, with something that they can go into the community with, and they can go back to their pathways programs to better strengthen their competition. So I think that's all part of it is, if there's an investment given to the clubs, I think there's some of that. I would suggest it would be strategically beneficial for the game to invest in those areas.
We've gone a little bit over time, but I've got 2 more questions for you. One from Fitz. James, could you ask Clint if he could change one thing in the game? What would it be? Cheers, Fitzy.
Oh, one thing in the game, I think the schedule. I genuinely think the schedule. I think that is that's a pathway for us to again generate more revenue, maximise the opportunity that we've got, grow our game, think more innovatively about end of season tournaments and events. But whilst ever you've got so much going on, it becomes really difficult to do.
Yeah. My final one. You still enjoy it, mate?
Yeah, obviously, like any job, you have your days
Yeah.
where you might struggle to put the shoes on in the morning and take it on because taking advocacy positions and being a union leader is the struggle and resistance is sort of part of the job.
Yes.
But you see so many benefits that come from it. I've got a fantastic team. They're hardworking, they're committed, they know their stuff, and we are representing some of the best people. In our region, and that makes me really proud to do what we do. You can see what they produce for fans, and I think the rise of the NRLW space has been so huge.
Yep.
I mean, as a father of 3 girls,
Yeah.
having them be provided something to look at and say, I can relate to you,
Yes.
I can aspire to be that. I think is outstanding. So. I've got a great board, and I've got plenty of petrol in the tank. So it's.
I would suggest that the emergence of the female game has been the saviour for so many regional rugby league clubs. You wouldn't believe it. Just watching that firsthand. Clint Newton, you're a good man. Appreciate your
Thanks,
time.
Jimmy.
Thanks for coming in. RLPA CEO Clint Newton. Let's get ourselves to the news, and then we're back with more.